Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you, Ken?
Exceptionally well. Glad to be here. This is episode 118 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, and a great episode packed with useful information. Whether you're a qualified therapist or a student, there is something here for you. We're going to start off with our first topic, and that is being the adult in the therapy room. Really interesting topic there, and something we need to be mindful of as therapists. And then we go into a special section that we call Practice Matters. And today, Rory, you're going to be covering the different forms of families. And it's, I guess, easy to think that a family is a family. I know what a family is, but there are so many differing forms.
Absolutely, and I'm going to be talking about different forms of families and also what you may have to think about in particular family structures.
And we're going to be ending episode 118 by speaking about helicopter skills. Now, this is not flying a helicopter. This is not having a helicopter in the corner of your therapy room. This is something completely different and something that every therapist should be practicing. So we'll leave that there and we will be approaching it, but we're going to kick off with our first topic, and that is being the adult in the therapy room.
Yes, there's a great phrase that the adult is parent to the child. It was coined by Keith Tudor, who is a well-respected author both in the person-centered world and in the world of transactional analysis. And it's very possible that through our practice journey, be you a student or be you a qualified therapist, that you will meet clients who are acting out in the therapy room, that are pushing your boundaries, trying to push your buttons. And it's really important that we stay as an adult, because there's at least one theorist, and that's Donald Winnicott, who talks about clients sometimes reenacting their very early childhood experiences in the therapy room. And what they're trying to do is they're pushing the boundaries, hoping that you'll interject and take on their kind of chaotic selves or their projecting selves, and that you will not overreact, you'll not judge, you'll not over-challenge. And there's a beautiful line in a book called Why Love Matters, and it says that you're helping the person have their childhood again, be a child again. So important for those clients who've had very difficult, neglectful or abusive upbringings.
It really keys into transactional analysis there, where you've got the parent, the adult, and the child ego states, and we're going to see those acted out. And we kind of, I guess, we all go through them as individuals. That I can find myself at times going, "Oh, that's not fair," and really being in that child ego state. But there's no place in the therapy room for the therapist to be in that ego state. You really want to be the adult in the room and being there, I guess, for the client, no matter where they go, staying in that adult, being almost like that that line, I guess, that holds it in place.
Absolutely. It's sometimes referred to as modeling, where the client will look to us for someone who is okay in the world, that I'm okay, you're okay position. And it's amazing that I've seen it in my practice where clients have acted out and you've absorbed that they begin to self-stabilize themselves and are able then to access their adult feelings. And you're all right, Ken, it is a TA idea, but it does make that journey from, the TA theory into most modalities of therapy. At some point or other, no matter what modality of therapy you're practicing, you'll meet a client who's acting out. And by being the adult in the therapy room and modeling what that looks like, you can help them take a part of you and interject it into them so they can stabilize themselves and, come from the here and now position. Someone's in a child position, they're in the past. The here and now position where therapy really does take place.
I like how you kind of went into this, how you started it of potentially a client coming in and pushing your buttons as the therapist, where you find yourself drawn into that critical parent ego state or that moving away, I guess, from the adult. And it's it can happen without us seeing it. It's interesting how this all kind of lines up, because our final topic for episode 118, which you're going to love, is helicopter skills, and that is about looking at self. And we can sometimes find ourselves, I know I have, and taken it into supervision, going off that adult ego state and kind of drifting away. It's easily done because it can be a subconscious process that we find ourselves being drawn. So it's about being really aware of who we are and our role within that relationship.
Absolutely. And that leads me into my favourite thing, transference, Ken. Transference and counter-transference. Not that I mention it too much in this podcast, but, the idea that we can be drawn in to the past, that maybe when we work with a client who's projecting onto us, then we're taken back to a past self or a past relationship. And before long, we're not seeing that client as a new person to us, a vibrant person, a person of worth in the therapy room, but we are reacting to a relationship we've had in the past. And that relationship, interestingly enough, could be with ourselves. It could be an intrapsychic relationship where the client's childish behavior is actually tapping in to our own child part. So as you rightly say, when we get to the end of this podcast, using helicopter skills is a really useful way of checking that and making sure that you are the adult in the therapy room.
I like it. And I guess some of the clues that adult state may be slipping is if you start feeling irritation, if you start feeling anger, if you start feeling any kind of judgmental, they shouldn't be doing that and they should be doing this and all that, you can feel yourself. So a lot of being that adult in the therapy room is about knowledge of self and self-monitoring as the therapist, as the process is taking place.
Absolutely. And if you're moving into being a parent and telling them to stop it,
yeah,
don't do that. Or if you're joining in, then you've slipped away. And yeah, it is healthy to access all parts of ourselves, but I think that in the therapy room, trying to stay in the adult to adult relationship, we know the research tells us is the best place to be for a best outcome of therapy for our clients.
Like it. So we're going to be going into Practice Matters in a moment, and in today's Practice Matters, Rory, you're going to be speaking about different families, different kinds of families.
I am, and I'm going to quote some Shakespeare, Henry V. From this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. And Shakespeare tells us a universal truth about how we see relationships and family. This is a quote, of course, from the eve of a great battle, where those who fought see themselves as a family. And I'm going to be talking about how people see themselves as part of different family units that are not always mum, dad, brother and sister.
Practice Matters after this very short message.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Differing types of family structure. Mention the name family and most people will think of what is known as a nuclear family. The nuclear family is sometimes referred to as a traditional type of family structure, typically consists of two parents and two children, and the term was coined in 1947. It's worth remembering also that this two parent and children family is quite a relatively new construct. Up until the 1900s, certainly in the UK, people couldn't afford to live individually unless you were very rich, and you would find huge family communes. It was only as society became more wealthy and people could afford to move away from the parents that they bought houses and became what we would know as a nuclear family. And I think one of the reasons most people think of this as, inverted commas, a normal family is that it's the one most seen in the media, and to some extent it's a societal norm. It's the one we think of more than often. That said, family structures come in many different types, and a person may identify themselves as a member of many different families. For example, a single parent may live in a larger extended family consisting of parents or relatives. Single parent families, who consist of a mother or a father with children, are now becoming one of the largest family groupings here in the UK. According to UK-based charity Gingerbread, that supports single parents, there are around 1.8 million single parents, making up nearly a quarter of families with dependent children. Around 1% are single parents are teenagers. Around 90% of single parents are women. The average age of a single parent is 38 years old, and the proportion of families with children headed by single parents has remained at around 25% over a decade. The proportion of single parents who are fathers has stayed at around 10% over 10 years. And the source comes from the Office of National Statistics in 2017. They're a UK government-based organisation that produces statistics for governments and charities or anyone to use to evidence any form of research. Other forms of family are adopted family. Now, an adoptive family contains at least one adoptive child and at least one adoptive parent. Sometimes children, as well as adults, use the term real parents instead of birth parents. So if you hear someone using the term birth parents, that's the genetic parenthood, the parents they are connected to genetically. But their real parents may very well have been the parents who brought them up because they were adopted. We also have blended families, and in its most basic form, a blended family is one where the parents have children from previous relationships, but all members of the family live together as one unit. Blended families are becoming increasingly common as divorce rates rise. And finally, a new type of family grouping, family by choice. In a world dominated by the internet and identity politics, the family of choice is a relatively new familial construct found in industrialized societies such as the United States of America and to some extent the United Kingdom. The term was coined by the LGBTQ community, and that's gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender and queer community, to describe a family not recognised by the legal community. And I think that tells a story in itself as societies catch up with acknowledging different forms of family under law. The term can also be applied to any grouping of individuals who see themselves as part of a family connected by a common experience or interest. An example of this is the 12-step recovery community of individuals in recovery from alcohol or substance misuse. And the term can also be used for any collective group who identify themselves by pursuing any interest or common sense of connection. And in the rise of the internet and social media, there are a lot of people who see themselves in distinct groups who ask for support through social media and may very well think of their Facebook or social media contacts as family. The list of family, as I've discussed, is not definitive. However, the key thing to consider is if a client talks about their family, is not to assume they're referring to one specific group or your own family construct. And if you're unsure about what kind of family they're talking about, it may be useful just to check. I usually say, when you talk about family, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about that, just to give a real good sense of what type of family grouping they're referring to.
Thank you as always, Rory. And what's interesting to me is, when I first learnt about this, I was your student, as many of our listeners will already know, during my counselling study journey. And for me, family was family. They were the people that I was related to. But it's bigger than that. And that's what we need to take into consideration. It's more of an identification. And of course, if you want to get Rory's super duper handout on families, you can get it from our website, and it's absolutely free. It's kind of a précis of what he spoke about today. To get that, go to our website, which is counsellingtutor.com. That's 2 L's in the word counselling, counsellingtutor.com, because we're based in the UK and that's how we spell it here. And when you get to the website, just click on the podcasts tab, click on episode 118. That's today's episode. And you'll be taken to a page which kind of represents today's show. We call it the show notes, and you'll see a little précis of what we've spoken about today, any relevant links out to additional reading material you will find there. And you can download Rory's super duper handout for free from that page. And of course, if you are already a member of our paid for service, our Counsellor resources, well then that handout has already been added to your handouts vault. All you need to do is log in and it is there waiting for you. So moving on, episode 118 to helicopter skills. I can hear the blades rotating as we speak, Rory.
That's my poor impression of helicopter. Sounds like a machine gun, doesn't it? So yes, I'll stick to counselling, not impressions. Yes, helicopter skills, and this question is generated from a question that was asked in our Facebook page. And if you don't know where our Facebook page is, you're super duper missing out here. If you go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. Remember, there's 2 L's in counselling tutor. You'll find us. We're a closed group, but if you knock on the door, of course, we're going to let you in and welcome you along with the thousands of other qualified colleagues, people still in training, students in training, supervisors, and we've got some tutors in there. All contribute. And one of the questions that was asked is how do we assess clients and where we are in the therapeutic relationship? Well, we're in the client's frame of reference. And it's really interesting. Towards the end of my course, my tutor talked about helicopter skills. And I remember now, Ken, sitting in a circle thinking, what? I've learned counselling, now I've got to fly a flipping helicopter. What's going on here? And what she was saying was that sometimes we've got to stand outside the relationship, almost like we're looking, we're our own third person in the room, looking at ourselves and the client and asking ourselves what's going on, what is actually going on in the relationship, what's our process, how is the client responding to that, where the client is. And it's a really useful skill. And of course, the reason it's called a helicopter skill is because we're literally hovering above the relationship, looking down and taking really a view from a distance. And as we know, that can be so useful. You can see so much from afar.
Yes, they call it that 30-foot view. You can see so much more when you're above something looking down on it. And it is advanced. It really is. So when you first go into practice, or if you're a student and you're in placement and you're thinking, wow, it takes everything that I have just to be in psychological contact and be in the client's frame of reference, that's okay. Be aware of this. You'll find, I guess, at that early level, you may be in the relationship with the client, and then all of a sudden something will jar, and all of a sudden you find yourself outside. They may say something and you go, is that a breach of ethics? And you're suddenly outside of yourself, and it can feel like a jar. As you kind of refine that skill, you kind of almost see it coming. You're above the relationship, and it's weird in a way. It's almost like an out-of-body experience. It's not an out-of-body experience, but it's strange. It's very difficult to explain it, isn't it?
It is, Ken. It is very difficult to explain. And I think the best way you could explain it is like some people have 2 monitors for their computer. They have one where they're looking at one specific thing and another monitor where say, for instance, you're doing kind of photo editing. You might be looking at the real detail of what you're editing and what you're colouring in. But on the other monitor, you're looking at the whole picture. And that's the analogy I'd use, that that eventually you could do both with equal attention. That's the key thing. When you first start using the kind of helicopter skills, like on the monitor, your eye may be taken to one of the monitors only, where you're looking at the bigger picture and not the detail. When you develop that skill, you're looking at both. You're able to hold them together. Sometimes it's referred to as esoteric thinking. I like that, esoteric thinking, where you're holding nice. two ideas, it's in suspension, and you can view them both. I guess it's like looking at the dash, driving your car. You're looking out the window, paying attention to the road, aren't you? Hopefully, but also you're looking at the speedometer. You're thinking about your gears. It becomes second nature. But the reason that helicopter skills are useful is because part of a competent therapist is to assess what's going on in the therapy room, not just in in the client's frame of reference. So you need to have an understanding of what's going on. Where are you in this? The question that comes up in supervision time and time again, certainly when I'm supervising, is who are you to the client? Who's the client to you? What is the relationship? Where is it? And it's only when those questions are examined and inspected that we can really understand how effective we are in the therapeutic relationship. It doesn't matter what modality that we're practicing. The research is clear now, and it's been clear for a number of years that the quality of the therapeutic relationship, it has the best outcome for clients. And also, part of helicopter skills is to check us if we make a rupture. If by some mistake or we're not quite in the client's frame of reference, we miss a client. And you can only see that from a 300-foot view.
Yeah.
So occasionally I will say to a client, I've just missed you there. And you can see the client looking and saying, well, thank you for, not just pretending to understand me. And that again is a clear message of you as the therapist wanting to really, really understand this client. And you can only do that if you can be in the relationship and be at a distance at the same time. It's a interesting skill to master.
And it's complex. It's rewarding when you get there because it becomes that unconscious competence. As you were referring to having the two monitors. If you're working with that on a daily basis, you almost don't notice that you're looking at the detail or the bigger picture. It is all the picture. It becomes that unconscious competence. It is just something that you do naturally. And we started today's episode 118 speaking about being the adult in the therapy room, and we mentioned that in order to do that we need to be monitoring what's happening within ourselves internally, and part of those helicopter skills is not just the client's frame of reference but where we are. And I think you were saying it, Rory, going into supervision, where are you in this relation? Where are we in that relationship? And if you think about that, it's almost contradictory in we're saying we want to be 100% in the client's frame of reference, but at the same time, we need to be looking at where we are. What are we feeling? What are we experiencing? Are we feeling irritated? Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling judgmental? Am I feeling sorry for them? And it's the helicopter skills that kind of envelopes all of that. And it's a complex process. And I guess why we do 4 years plus of study before going out and calling ourselves therapists, because within the therapy room, you've got that relationship, you've got the client, you've got yourself that you're bringing in. You also have the ethical framework to which you work is there with you in that therapy room. You also have your agency conditions that you would work to in that therapy room. You also have what you've taken from supervision, from taking this client before that you're bringing into the therapy room. There is so much there, and it is that bigger picture that kind of brings that all together, and then it kind of flows through you as the therapist at point of contact with that client.
Oh yeah, you absolutely can. You've taken the words from under me, quite frankly. With that, you're absolutely correct. Things like boundaries, things like the contract. Of course, we can't have an episode with me at least not mentioning transference and counter-transference. That really can only be seen from a distance, because you're looking at yourself and you're thinking, so, where am I? How am I reacting? It really literally is like flying a plane, being a therapist. It literally is like flying a plane. You're not just looking out the window at the clouds and hoping to find the airfield. You're looking at all the instrumentation that carries you safely through that journey. And I think that's a great analogy for counselling. It's the helicopter skills, the contracts, the attention to transference and counter-transference, the repatriative part of your the way you're working, the unconditional positive regard. All of these are things that you have to pay attention to, because if you don't pay attention to them and you miss out, it can have a real impact on the therapeutic relationship. If a boundary is crossed and you don't notice that and you carry on with that, it's a lot harder to pull back in the next session or another session. So, yeah, I think that developing those skills, and maybe my challenge to those who listen is you probably do this already. You probably don't know you're doing it, quite frankly. Do you ever find yourself saying, is that an ethical concern? Is that a boundary issue? How do I feel about that? How am I feeling with the client? It links really in, of course, to the skill of being a self-supervisor as well.
Yeah, I love it. This is such a great topic. I encourage you to continue with this line of conversation with this topic on our Facebook group. Get into Facebook, put in Counselling Tutor, come and join the conversation. Tens of thousands of like-minded people already in the group. And these are the kind of conversations that we have. This has been a great episode. I need to recognize that we've come to the end of episode 118, Rory, that we're kind of coming to the end of season 6, because we kind of break our podcasts up into different seasons, and we run them according to the United Kingdom academic year. At the time of making this, we're fast approaching the end of the UK academic year, so we'll come to the end of season 6, and we'll be back with season 7 for the start of the new academic year around September time, if you listen to this in real time, with a slightly adjusted format, because we also, for each season, adjust the format slightly. So it's just that acknowledgement, I guess, that as we come to the end of episode 118, we are approaching the end of season 6, but we will be back, of course, next week.
Absolutely. And what a great episode it's been. We started off with being the adult in the therapy room. I talked about different constitutions of families in Practice Matters, and also gave a little, if poor, rendition of Henry V's Shakespeare. And then we finished off with helicopter skills, making sure that we could see what's going on in the therapy room, as well as being in the client's frame of reference. And hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.